In terms of, putting this out there, if they say, okay, produce the evidence, can he just plead the Fifth now? Does he still have that on the table?
He has the Fifth until he gets immunity, and then he doesn't have it anymore. What immunity means, you have a Fifth Amendment privilege, so you cannot be compelled to give testimony against yourself that can be used against you in a criminal prosecution, okay? Once you get immunity, then your testimony cannot be used against you in a criminal prosecution. Therefore, you no longer have the protection of the Fifth Amendment.
But even if he says, I have the evidence, I have the evidence, I have the evidence, if it in any way implicates him, he can still plead the Fifth if he's called to testify without an immunity deal.
Any lawyer would tell him whether he thinks that his client has got some criminal exposure or not. You don't testify unless you get immunity because, look, from a lawyer's point of view, we lawyers, we don't know whether what the client is telling us is the truth, not the truth, and so you don't know what the prosecution thinks they have. They may think they have something which really isn't reality. But the fact is, they're the one holding, they have the leverage, they have the cards.
And you know what, Bill? You might have known this, maybe you did too. I never realized how much legal bills played a role in this process. You read Wildstein's letter, and we played you the experts. The first 2/3 of it is, why isn't my guy's number getting footed here by somebody else? He doesn't want to go to his own pocket. He might not even be able to. And now he's got the world looking at him and learning his name for the first time. A lot of this is being driven by the fact that nobody's covering these guys, and as a consequence, they may be more incentivized, in addition to the governor throwing gas on the fire, to go to the feds and say, I'll play ball.
Well, not to be cynical, the fact is, these lawyers don't work for free. Yes. So if they're confronted with a client that says, look, I can't afford to pay your fees, so you have to figure out some other source of revenue. Well, wait a minute. My guy was working for you folks, the government. The government should be footing his bills because, after all of this arose out of his government service.
Can we afford to have you on this segment?
Yeah, exactly. That much longer. All right, now, Dominic, we go from the legal court to the court of public opinion. And it's funny. You and others have been saying the bullying routine is going to wear pretty thin pretty soon here for Christie. I want to play a soundbite, Ralph, if you have it, from that 2-hour press conference when the governor was asked about David Wildstein. And this is what, in part, he had to say, and literally, it goes high school. Take a listen.
It is true that I met David in 1977 in high school. David and I were not friends in high school. We were not even acquaintances in high school. We went 23 years without seeing each other. I think some of the stories where they're written impute like an emotional relationship and closeness between me and David that doesn't exist.
The soundbite, the muddy soundbite, was actually him saying, Christie saying, I was class president, I played sports, I don't know what circles he traveled in. That's what I was hoping to share with everybody. But the point was, to that end, he now turns around and says, I can't make this stuff up. He was disruptive, Christie talking about Wildstein. He was disruptive in social studies class, and he went after in a separate instant, went after his high school paper. And then, as if it matters, both of the people involved, from the people at the school paper and the social, they said, oh, this was over-exaggerated, it wasn't a big deal. You can't go from saying you never knew about this guy's existence to, by the way, appointing the guy, and then all of a sudden going into what he did in social studies class. It really comes off as small and petty, and apparently from people close to Wildstein, what he did in that press conference and has said subsequently, in addition to legal bills, was part of the impetus for him to go public.
Of course, what Governor Christie is doing right now is just not wise. I don't know who's advising the governor. There's no doubt you knew this man in high school. But all the governor is doing, Richard, is motivating him to come forward and to release whatever evidence that Wildstein may have. First of all, all of this happened while he was at the Port Authority, and which, Governor, you put him there as an appointee. But now you're telling us that he's not a good guy. So
why did you appoint him?
Well, right, so which one is it? The governor is starting to look desperate. All he had to do was look at the headlines Saturday, oh my God, of the Saturday newspapers. He's starting to look, you may not like this language, but he's starting to look like a dead man walking politically.
Well, it's as though his defense for the charges that he acted illegally is I was incompetent. I acted incompetently, not illegally. I just didn't know, which doesn't seem like much of a defense politically and probably disqualifies you to be president. The other thing is, you know, if he lied to the voters, if he lied to the public.
There's a day and a time for 2016, and the polls suggest this has taken a hit on him. But he got booed.
I'm not talking about
He
2016. I'm talking about Richard.
We talk
I'm talking about him finishing his term.
If he was lying at that press conference, he's going to be impeached.
Right. He's
because,
not right.
Because
he's not
you don't need to prove a legal threshold to be impeached. It's a political decision.
Right.
And if he was lying to the people when he drew that line in the sand of the press conference, they're going to kick him out.
Richard, remember this man that he's attacking, Wildstein. You have to know, Governor, that he's got the goods, just like the Bridget staffer has the goods. Why do you think they're being quiet? They're waiting to see who's going to offer them the best deal. And the governor is just giving them ammunition to give it to the feds.
Or we can say they were motivated out of spite to try and get him. But yeah, I hear you.
There's another sinister aspect to this also, is that if the governor knows that Wildstein...
You got to wrinkle your mustache when you
well,
do
that. If the governor knows that Wildstein has the goods and may be talking to the authorities to present evidence against him, one of the things that Christie accomplishes by dirtying up Wildstein, by talking about how he was deceptive by his, in high school and all this other stuff, is he sort of taints his credibility off the bat. He's sort of sending a signal subliminally to the prosecution or to anybody else who's investigating this thing, saying, look, this guy is not what you may think he is. There's a lot of stuff in this guy's background, a lot of skills.
He's
not credible.
Social studies class.
Well, yeah, well, that's where it starts.
I know,
but you flip it around. When did the governor know that? And if he knew it back then why do you appoint him to this position in the first place?
And he's going to say, Bridget Kelly, if he had any doubts about this woman, why did he elevate her to the point that she was within his inner circle? It's just...
I wasn't doing anything wrong. I'm just terrible at my job.
And that's, if anything, for people who know his M.O., he literally, they were going into detail. He micromanaged who was on a psychiatric board of the state of New Jersey. You can't all of a sudden be in a vacuum about this. Finally, Bill, let me ask you. When you do a federal investigation, but yet you got different state agencies, in this case, the Assembly and the State Senate, they're involved too. I know it complicates it, but do people have to draw, you know, this is my turf, this is your turf? Does it run the risk of screwing up the investigation if there's too many cooks in the kitchen?
Well, there's an old saying, don't pull on Superman's cape, you know, and in this case, the federal government is Superman. I mean, it really is. But yeah, I mean, anytime you have a lot of different agencies, they all have their own agendas, there's a lot of distrust, they don't like working with each other. Somebody's got to take the lead, you know, and everybody wants to be that guy. But, you know, everybody cannot be that guy. And so that complicates the ability of different agencies, federal, state, local, to work together in any cohesive fashion.
And I've heard today this thing's going to be months. Is that a fair timetable, you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, look, with everything we've seen and heard, we still have not seen anything about a smoking gun. There isn't. So far, it seems, if anything, it's he said, she said, he said. You need more than that if you're going to make a case, especially when you're going after big game, and Governor Christie is big game.
There's so many different ways that can go. All right, when we come back, we will talk, obviously, what everyone thought we'd be talking about today, which was the Super Bowl. A little bit of a dud on the field here, but certainly a lot to talk about in the run-up to it, and the ads, and even some of the halftime stuff and more. Stay with us. We'll be right back.